All right, let's jump into things here since we only got a couple people. Thank you everyone for spending some time on your Wednesday. Hope everyone's having an okay day so far at the very least. Um, so this week are so this week is a review week. There's no new content, and so particularly this week more than others, I would like to leave as much time open at the beginning as possible, just for anything that people are stuck on, any questions that you have, whether they be about something that's not currently working, or just sort of questions about the big picture or something that you're curious about. We can go through anything and everything. I think I would guess people maybe have some questions related to all of the stuff from this past week with asynchronous and callbacks and use reducer and all of that, because that gets complicated pretty quick. But if we run out of things to talk about, if no one has any particular questions after we go through and do our debugging, then we can go ahead and start on new functionality to the shopping platform that we've been working on. And what I want to do next is sort of introduce the useContext hook, which is another hook that's pretty important that doesn't, I don't think, get covered in the material, and we'll use it to create a cart that you can add items to. But that's only if we get there. You guys are first priority. So in terms of things that we want to go through, I know, Aljan, you had something that we need to debug. So we'll go ahead and do that first. Does anyone else have anything that we should put on the list of topics? Anything you're curious about? Any other debugging issues?
Hi, Ellie. I
Hi,
have a question.
okay.
I'm now working on CSS of the program, and I have a question about media queries, where to put them exactly.
Okay. Yeah, we can work on media queries.
Yeah,
I assume that you're already working on this CSS section, which is where this would be coming from. So you're a little ahead.
yeah, I worked on, and I did some CSS in the past, but where to put the media in React, in which file? That's my question.
Okay, we can go through and we'll
All right,
try and
thank
figure out
you.
what's going on. Anyone else have anything that you want to add? This is not your last chance. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing then, and Aljan, if you could go ahead and open up your project and just show us what's going on.
Can you see my screen?
We can see everything.
Yeah, excellent. So here's the deal. I showed you the part of the assignment which it was referring to. So basically, here's the thing. If we run, sorry, npm. How do I move this? Okay. Oops. So this is the outline as it's now. The buttons work and everything works. If I reload it, it's retrieves the old list from the local storage.
Okay.
However, it's working right now as the local the use state that we're using in the line 2021. just a second. Yeah, on the line 17, I started using the use state from the previous steps when we were supposed to do the JSON parsing from local storage. And then that particular line of the assignment which I showed you, it instructed us to do the step which I'm performing on the line 20 using state with default of empty array. However, if I do that, then oops, sorry, just if I do that, then it's not loading the information from the local storage, even though that the local storage actually is there. You can see it on the right? So this is the object.
Okay.
Can you see it?
We can see everything in there.
Yeah, if I reload, it just reloads the empty browser. If we follow the instruction of putting the empty array as a default.
Okay, so that's fine. My guess would be that after your promise resolve, something is not currently set up properly. So what we're expecting here, so it starts with the default array, and if you don't do anything differently, then that's all the data that's going to be in there that shows up on your page. And what we're doing is we're creating our promise that creates the to-do list on line 23, 24, result.data. Okay, so the reason why nothing's happening here is at least in this top use effect here, you're not retrieving anything from anywhere. This is essentially just grabbing whatever is actively in your to-do list state variable, which is
That's
what
correct.
happens when you resolve it on the 26th line, and then it goes on and it passes it and sets it back. So if you started with the JSON.parse, which grabs it immediately, then it's going to resolve the promise with that data that's already been fetched, set it to your to-do list, set loading, so on and so forth. So we shouldn't expect that to grab anything, correct? Because there's nowhere that we're actually calling our local storage.getItem. So there's no reason why we wouldn't be getting it from local storage. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was kind of blindly following the instructions. I cannot say that I understand everything 100% here.
Yeah.
But basically, I understand that we're using use effect, we're using the promise, and we're kind of mocking the fetching at this
Yes,
stage.
that's exactly what's happening. Can you scroll down for a second just so that I can see what's in your other use effects? Okay, so this use effect is just for when we update our to-do list, then it's going to resave it to storage. Okay, so this, I think everything here is exactly what you should expect. When we use the line 17 version of our use state, then what we're doing is we're initializing the default value of this to-do list to be what we get from local storage. And this executes immediately the first time the component runs.
Right.
And what this use effect up here is doing is mocking, well, not exactly mocking, but what it is doing is it's waiting 2 seconds before it resolves the promise. And all it's doing is passing whatever's currently in your to-do list state to the data that's being passed out of the promise when it's resolved. And when we have our line 20 set the default of this to-do list to be an empty array, well, then that's all we're going to resolve, an empty array. And on line 30 is when your promise does finally resolve or when it rejects. What are you going to do with it? And your then statement is when it does in fact resolve correctly. Our result is what we passed on line 26, which is just the default empty array. So nothing, we shouldn't expect to see anything. It's not grabbing anything from local storage. It's just taking that default empty array, resolving it, and then line 33 just sets it back to do the exact same thing. Right
Should I
now,
change?
this is
Should I
not doing
change line?
anything useful.
Yeah. Should I change line 26 then? Like put the JSON parse somewhere here?
I think you're going to find if you just keep going through the instructions, that's, I think, the very next thing that you're supposed to do. So in the instructions, right after you get to the bottom of your section that you were reading through, the next section, let me send you the link really quick to the wiki. I'll send it in the Zoom chat here for everyone so they can follow along with what we're saying.
Thank you.
So let's scroll down to that line you were stuck on in our instructions, a little higher up. There we go. So you were on update the default state in to-do list to be an empty array, and we view the application and notice that the to-do list is now empty and doesn't persist after refresh, which is exactly what you're expecting. And this next section here is saying, so what are we not doing? Well, we're not updating our to-do list to have all of those things from local storage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what we need to do here. We need to grab from local storage and pass that into our resolve. And then once we're finished, go ahead and I think you're exactly on the right track. You were saying on, I think, line 26 maybe in your code.
Okay, I'm sorry, just a second, got lost.
That's right. It's a lot of windows.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you're saying on line 26, instead of just grabbing whatever the default empty array is, we could put our JSON.parse local storage.get, that long piece of junk. We can pass that in.
Instead of to-do list, right?
Yes, exactly right. So it'll go ahead and grab it, and then it'll pass it back to the data property of our resolved promise. And then everything else should work as expected, I think.
So
We're gonna have to
yeah,
refresh the page.
yeah, I'm just hypothetical list, and then if we refresh, and it's there. Oh, cool, awesome. Thank you very much, Eli.
Very welcome.
Awesome, thank you. That was not as as scary as I thought it would be.
Nope, you were on the right track, which is always good.
Thank you.
Okay, I know that Manisha, you posted a question. I want to get to Fanny's question first, and then I'll go ahead and address that, and we can work through an example really quick. Fanny,
I'm
you're up
moving
next.
to my I'm moving to computer.
Okay, no worries. While we're waiting on you to get set up, I'm going to go ahead and address the other question, and then we'll come back to you. So Manisha's question was just using a promise, like a straight up promise. Is that pretty common in standard JavaScript? So let me jump in here. Let me re-screen share. Okay, this isn't what we want. But if we go into our textbook, let me open this really quick. Go to React. Online fundamentals. And asynchronous data. Is that a good example? No. Okay. So long story short, the way that you're doing it for this assignment is you're creating a promise outright with your resolve and your reject methods. And this is really not something that you're going to do very often. Really, the important thing to understand is how they work so that when you're not seeing it directly, you understand like what is the then method, what is the catch method, and if I have an asynchronous function that resolves a promise, how do I deal with it? Really, a promise is sort of an underlying thing that it's useful anytime where an asynchronous operation is happening. So when you're calling fetch, which is something you will do a lot when you're making a full stack application, anytime that you have any data that's being persisted somewhere else in a database, you're going to have some way of retrieving that data or performing some sort of operation like a login. And every time you call fetch, there's a promise behind the scenes with the data that comes back. Either it will resolve because you got the data that you want, or it will reject because there was an error in fetching that. But you probably will not be declaring new promise and then having your two different methods at the top here and then calling resolve on the inside. You could do this if you want to. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, but I think I can count on my fingers the number of times that I've ever written out a promise myself. Really, what you'll be doing is you'll be performing asynchronous operations in mostly with fetching or with subscribing to things where data is coming in consistently, and understanding how asynchronous operations work and how you can deal with the result is more important than how to actually declare a promise. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. All right. Fanny, are you set up and ready?
Yes, hi. Yeah.
All right. Can you go through your question for me one more time?
Yeah, for the media queries, I remember last time I did the project for my previous course, it was in index CSS. We were doing all the media all and
Okay.
like for every
All
imaginable device.
right.
Where I should locate it now.
I don't think there's a definitive answer to this.
Like in
I
what
think the
file?
answer really is sort of something that I was talking with Manisha about the other day. With regards to CSS, I think there's so many different ways that you can organize your CSS. What, where do you put your CSS files? How much CSS goes in one file versus another file? Do you create a CSS file for every single JavaScript component, or do you put multiple components and all of their stylings into one file?
Yeah, here
It's
we were asked to do for each component CSS module component name like app.module.css. That's what I did for each and every component.
okay.
Yeah, for each and every file in my application. So here I thinking of locating the media queries. It's just different styling for each media, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so for each component to put add media and proceed with whatever I think will be good.
Let me, I'm trying to find a project really quick, but I think that it's going to take too long. And so let me find it just on GitHub for you, just to sort of demo most recently when I've dealt with media queries, how I wanted to handle them. So this is a website that I created for myself, just a portfolio website. And this is using Svelte, which is a different JavaScript UI library. And the CSS for these pretty much happens. Svelte is interesting. They have you put all of your code for a component into one file, so you can create some JavaScript that goes with it, like the base HTML that creates the component, and then all of the style at the bottom. And this is not pure CSS. This is something called SCSS. But essentially what I did for all of these was put the media queries that are related to the actual components or whatever CSS is in this file. I put my media queries down at the bottom, and I just try and organize them as much as possible.
Enlarge? It's so tiny. I can't
Yes.
enlarge it at all.
Yes, I definitely can.
It's better. Yeah.
So for those of you guys who might not be following exactly what's going on here, one of the future lessons that we'll get to is CSS, which is a way of applying different colorations, different text styles, any way of customizing how your thing actually looks. We do that with CSS properties. And traditionally, these will go in a separate file, a .css file, and you can select a very specific HTML component or an HTML element that you're going to apply styles to, and then you specify everything. And we can apply it to an H1 element, which is just the largest header element available, or we can apply it to everything that shares a class, which is what this dot is for, or we could do a hashtag, which is IDs, or we could do a combination of a bunch. And media queries are a way that we can, most commonly this is for if we have a screen size that's smaller or larger, maybe we want to change the style that gets applied to a specific element. So for this particular element, it appears, top to bottom, and it's sort of a timeline of several different items. And if it gets too big, then we may want to expand the space that the timeline takes up so that we don't have too much empty space. But if it gets smaller, then there's probably too much content to all fit in the timeline if we put it like on a phone or on an iPad. And in that case, we apply some different styles to it. In this case, we'd be making the font size smaller so that it doesn't explode and ruin our UI. Sorry, you had a question?
I have a question, yeah. How do you, so you're just testing it on several platforms, right? Like on Seller or different cellulars, different tablets, different kind of sizes, right? And then you decide to make it whatever didn't make sense there, then you decide to apply media query, right? For this, to create the media query, right?
Yes. So let me just pull this up here, not to brag or anything, but just to show you what I'm working on. So this is the site, and this is our timeline. And this is fine. I have a very large monitor that I'm currently using to show you guys everything. But if I made the page a little bit smaller, like maybe this is a normal size laptop, then things start to shift a little bit. And we can also do something really cool with our dev tools. So if you inspect, these are all of your dev tools. I do want to do a day of just talking about your dev tools because I think there's a lot here that is really, really important to be able to handle. So one thing we can do with our dev tools is we can actually specify, there's a little button down here that looks like a phone or a tablet. And what this does is it constricts the width and the height of the page to match a bunch of different layouts. So if I wanted to try it on a phone, we could select one of these phones and it creates a pixel size about the same size as a phone screen. And right now, this all looks pretty good to me. All the text, lines up properly and nothing is overflowing its boundary. And this is because I've added a bunch of media queries that when we get to a screen size this small, in our case, if we get to a screen size below, I think it's 750 pixels, then our text would be too big and it would overflow the boundary, and so we make it smaller. So really the only way that you can test something like this is by opening up your dev tools, by playing with the browser size. I don't just like have an iPad lying around or a bunch of different things. There's an infinite number of devices. And so using your dev tools to play with a couple of different layouts, you can also deselect all of these, or I guess not, but you can play with the size like this. And depending on how your website reacts, if you see something undesirable, add a media query where on this screen size, change the specific element to do the right thing. And getting the exact breakpoints, like 750 pixels specifically, was what broke my website. It just comes from playing with the size of the screen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. And then
Awesome.
in each and every CSS file that I created for each component, if this component looks bad in such an other environment, so there to fix it.
That's exactly what media queries are for. Most commonly, they're for your screen size, but I think you can also do media queries for like the browser window or some other things.
Media queries. Add multimedia usage, iconography. So just
Iconography.
yeah, just download some icon and use it.
Yeah, that's something that happens pretty often. I'm not a graphic designer or anything like that. So
Yeah, but just to
these,
try, they want us to try different things.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm
Yeah.
just not sure what is it about. So yeah, just to
Mhm.
download some icon and place it somewhere or some kind of whatever you did with your photograph, right? Your
Yep.
photo picture.
You
Yeah.
can play with image tags. Images are
Yeah.
one way that you can create icons.
Mm-hmm.
Very often with icons, you want an SVG format rather than a PNG format. A PNG is like an actual image format. You
Mm-hmm.
can make it smaller or bigger. If you make it bigger, you're probably going to have a really grainy looking image and you're not going to like that.
Mm-hmm.
But an SVG is literally just a definition of lines, and you can scale those much bigger or much smaller pretty easily. And so a lot of icons will be SVG files because if we make them bigger or we make them smaller, it still looks pretty good. I think I have these icons to grow and shrink as well.
Another question.
Mhm.
Navigation items. They want us to. One of the rubrics is to customize style of navigation items. I don't have any navigation right now, so just to add any navigation to like hrefs, right? And to customize them.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I don't know exactly what navigation items you really want, but typically you might have like a navigation bar at the top, or some people will have a drawer where you click a little button and it pops out from the side. You could try one of those approaches and apply some stylings to it. I don't know. I haven't read that far ahead in the instructions for the assignments yet, but if it doesn't specify like specific navigation elements, you could literally just create a navigation bar at the top and then it doesn't do anything.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions about literally anything?
Eli, it's me again. I'm sorry, I had to leave the computer, but yeah, I'm currently talking from the phone. But let me explain. One of the last tasks from the assignment was to use ternary operator to render either sign loading if it's false, or to render the to-do list component. If we put just to-do list component then it messes up the order of the styles and appearance on the browser. So it doesn't mean that when we're rendering, we have to put everything like add to-do list components all together within the fragment.
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
Yeah, I wish I could show. Unfortunately, I cannot. Well, if it's
Okay.
not clear, then it's fine. Disregard my question then.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to approach this without you showing me. So if this is something that you're curious about, that you're stuck on, you could send it to me after, whenever you get back to it. I'm always available asynchronously. But if you
Yeah,
figure it
thanks.
out, then of course there's no reason.
Yeah, I didn't stack on that part. It's just when I was just trying to execute the instructions as it's provided in the lesson, then in that case it was kind of messing up the order of elements shown on the browser. But then when I put in the ternary operator not only to do component, but also added that within the fragment together with add to-do list and all other components, then everything works fine. So I was just wondering whether it's a proper way to do it, whether we need to put everything along with to-do list component. But as I said, yeah, without showing, it's probably sounds too much confusing. All right, thank you.
Mm. Typically, I think what you're doing for this assignment is rendering one or the other. Either you're rendering your loading message or your whole to-do list form, and you probably don't want to do both. And I think you're supposed to do it in app.js, not in this to-do list item or anything. But what we can do is we can render just like a paragraph here that just says loading. If our condition is not met, or your condition will be is loading, I think. And so if is loading is true, then we just render our loading element. Otherwise, we can render our whole structure here with our add to-do list. Or, sorry, this would probably just be your to-do list. So the actual content of the list is what we're loading, and it's not available yet. And so that's the only thing that should be conditionally not shown while we're still loading. I think you can still show your to-do form, since that doesn't have any effect on the actual loading behavior, but you could also conditionally render that as well, whatever you think makes the most sense. Any other questions? Okay. So the secondary activity here for today was to create a cart function using the useContext hook. We got about 20 minutes. I don't know if we're going to be able to finish it, but we could start at the very least. But I also don't want to get halfway through and then just leave people hanging. So if this is something that you guys are interested in doing as a group, we can go ahead and do it. If you think it would be better to hold off until a future week, maybe next week, we could do that as well. Maybe if you could go into your participants tab, or maybe that's not it. Just give me like a yes or no, whether we should do it today or no, we should do it next week, just for popular vote. All right, no one feels strongly today or next week. Anyone else? All right. If no one says no, okay, then let's go ahead and see how much we can do. So let me open up the branch where I was working on this feature, and I'll show you what the plan is. And then we'll talk through what the useContext hook is, and then actually get rolling. Okay, so what we've got here is our previous version of this where it's just a list of all the products, and we can search for a product. We could search for Windows. All right, maybe that's broken. Suitcase. All right, maybe it's not broken. I don't know what that was about. Anyway, we can search for things, we can filter things, but now what we've done is we've added a button on the bottom where we can add to cart. And if we add to cart our lamp, then it goes ahead and puts it up in the cart here. And this is just our temporary storage where all of the things that we want to buy are located. If we go into our dev tools, we go into storage, and I'm going to go into local storage. We can see that there's a cart key down here where we expand it. It's an array of the different kinds of objects that we have and how many of them, and then what the actual object is. We have 3 different lamps. And we could go ahead and clear this out if we want to and reload our page, and our cart is empty. This is something that we would also want to have a clear or a delete button for. I don't think we'll get to that today, but if we do, great.
Kelly, can you enlarge your image? Like
Yes.
enlarge the screen? Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I always forget. All right, so let's go ahead and look at what our useContext hook is. So one thing that comes up pretty often in React is that when our project gets really big, we probably have a really, really complicated tree of React components that are inside of React components. This might be a really, really long tree as well. Like maybe you have a page that has a bunch of different components, and one of those has a bunch of its own components, so on and so forth. But there might be data that needs to pass through your entire application. And if you passed it to every single component as a prop, it would be exhausting and you would probably make some blunders somewhere. This most commonly can be seen if you have a theme for your site. Maybe you have a dark theme, a light theme, or a high contrast theme where you can change the way that your site looks. This site over here has a dark and a light theme. And when we change those, all of our different components render differently. So colors are going to change. In that case, I think that's pretty much it. But the highlighting on the code also changes, things like that. And all of these components are probably many, many, many deep. And we wouldn't want to pass that all the way down. And same thing happens for login. So user authentication, we probably need to pass the user details to every single page in our site. And some components might randomly need access to that. But if we pass those all the way down, then that's also kind of a nightmare. And so this is where context comes in. And context creates sort of a subscription where one of your components at the very top of your application, usually in app.js, will provide all of a bunch of different values that you care about. In the context of themes, maybe you're providing is dark theme, which is a Boolean, whether or not the dark theme is active, or a string of what kind of theme is currently active. Or in the context of user authentication, you're providing your entire user and all of the details that you get from your database. And your provider, which is at the very top and is a component that sort of encapsulates your whole app, will go ahead and have all those values stored, and you can subscribe to them from anywhere in your application without passing down a bunch of different properties. And anytime those change, your components that subscribe to them will get those updated values and can change themselves as well. Again, in this case, maybe if we change our theme, then some random piece of text many, many layers down can go ahead and change. And the reason why we would kind of be interested in this for a cart is we would like to be able to have the items that are available in our cart and also the functions to interact with our cart from all of the different pages on our site. So if we go to Amazon, just for a quick demo, our cart is up here and it creates, it takes us to a page where we can view our cart, interact with it. But if we go to anywhere else in the site, whether we're looking for specific items or maybe we go to your account page, our cart is always available. And if we go and find something we really like, we can go ahead and add it to our cart and it's interactable from anywhere. So that's what we're going to create. We're going to create a cart that works with local storage, where if we add something and then come back to our page later, it's still available. It is also something that we can subscribe to from anywhere in our application. In this case, we only have one page, so it's kind of over the top. But it'll provide us the current items in the cart anywhere we need them, and also the functions to interact with the cart anywhere we need. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go, let me get you guys the GitHub link if you don't already have it, that we're working with here. Cool. All right, so this is our React shopping platform. I'm going to paste the link in here. If you don't already have this cloned from a previous week, go ahead and run git clone, and then this link anywhere on your computer that you want it. And then you'll have to go in and run npm install to get all of the packages and stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to keep going because we're on limited time, but we can go back if we need to at a later date. So if there's something that I say that's confusing or an error you're having, speak up sooner rather than later. All right, so when you clone, you'll be on the master branch. Go ahead and run git pull just to make sure that you have the most updated version with all of our search functionality that we worked on a couple weeks ago. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call git branch, and then we're going to call it cart, and we're going to git checkout cart. And then we're going to work from here. So we're going to do a couple things. Right now, our app only has our listings page, but we need an actual display for our cart, and we also need all the logic that our cart holds. So let's create two files here. Let's create cart display.js, and this is going to be a functional component. And we're just going to make this a temporary element here until we get back to it. And don't forget to export so that you can import it somewhere else. And let's go into our app.js. Let's turn this into a fragment for now. And let's add our listings page here. And let's add our cart display on the top of our listings page. And it's going to auto import for me. And so these two things will render on top of each other. I'm going to call npm start just so that it's running consistently in the background. And we should see, hopefully, at the very top, we have our to-do, which is where our cart stuff will show up. All right. So let's start there. More important than the actual display is we need a file where our logic is going to happen. So if we go back into our useContext, and let's go back to dark theme because this is hurting my eyes. What we'll notice is there's there's two elements here. We have the useContext call, which happens in the child that says, I want to get the current values provided by this particular context. And so this is some child component at the base level, and then it gets back the values that are provided. And then we also have our provider element, which actually sends a current value to everything nested as far down as you want inside. So this needs to go at the top level, this provider. And then this is our actual context. So trying to go through this page is going to take a long time. I think the better thing that we can do right now is just work through and kind of explain what each piece is doing. The first step of creating context is actually initializing it. So let's call this cart context. And this is going to be a thing that we're creating. And we're going to have the create context function, which is an import from React. And then we need to give it a default value, which this is like a state value where you give it a default. In this case, our cart is going to be an array of a bunch of different items. And so our default value is going to be an empty array with no items in it. And then here's what we're going to do. The way that I think makes the most sense here, because there's going to be a bunch of different stuff that gets thrown into this value property. This value property is where all of your current values of things get passed down. And when this changes, then all the children get the updated value. We're going to put it all into its own components. So we're going to create our new component here. We're going to take in one property, which is children. That way we can pass in a tree of elements and have those all run. Okay, so this looks good. And what we need to do is we need to create a state variable here. Set cart equal to use state, and this is going to be our empty array here. We just make sure that I'm doing this correctly, so that we don't get too far in the wrong direction. Use state. Great. Okay, we're all good here. And we want to get this from local storage, and we've already done this before. So let's go ahead and write that call out here, json.parse local storage.get, and we'll have the key here be cart. And if this doesn't work, then we want to just get an empty array. Get item, sorry. And this will return a string. If it doesn't, it returns null. Then we just give it a string with an empty array, and then json.parse can handle that. And so this is our cart. This is our one source of truth. This will be where all of our cart is stored always, and then our children can subscribe to this particular cart wherever they want. And we need a couple of different ways to interact with this cart. Let's create a function add to cart, new item. And we're not going to do anything with this right now. We probably need a clear cart function. We're also not going to do anything with this. And let's create one more remove from cart. And we'll leave it like that. And so what we can do here is in our JSX, where we're going to return things, we're going to return this context up here, cart context dot provider. And we're going to pass it the value of whatever we want to give to all of our children. And we're going to create an object here. And this object is going to have everything that we want to expose to our children. So we want them to be able to get whatever's currently in the cart, but not set it directly. We don't want to pass them set cart because that's dangerous. But we can pass add to cart. We can pass clear cart. We can pass remove from cart. And let's create one more function here, update quantity. Item new quantity. Actually, we're not going to do that. We're not going to deal with quantity because I don't think we have time for that. So this is all we're going to do here. And inside of here, we need to be sure that we go ahead and take whatever gets passed in, the children, all of the different React components get passed in, and render those inside of our provider. And make sure at the bottom we export our new component that we just created. All right, so this is our cart. This is our basic structure. What's happening here is we have our single provider. This is only going to exist once, although we could have multiple different providers of a context if we want. And it's going to provide all of these values, the current versions of them. These functions aren't ever going to change, but this cart is. And anytime that we do update this cart, this component re-renders because that's how state works. And our provider gives a new value for cart to all of its children. So what are we going to do with this? We're going to go into app.js. We're going to replace this fragment with our cart. Let's call this cart provider, actually, because that's a more accurate description. But of course, you can call it whatever you want. So cart provider, we're going to import cart provider. And now inside of our cart display, what we can do is we can grab all of those values. useContext, which is our hook, where we can say this particular context that we've created get the closest provider to me. In this case, we only have one provider at the highest level, but it gets the closest provider and grabs all the values that are currently provided. And this doesn't exist. What we really want to do is we want to grab this cart context element here. So we also need to export this variable. And we're going to just export these separately here as named exports. So the difference between export default is export default allows us to just import from this file, and there's only one thing, one default, and we can call it whatever we want. But now, if we want to grab our cart provider, it's a named export, so this isn't going to work. And we need to import it inside of braces here, which is a named import. And we can do the same thing here. We can import our cart context, which is now available. And we can grab whatever values we want. What we want to grab here is the current stuff that's in our cart. Notice these are named properties of this object. So we need to have the exact name. We probably want remove from cart and also clear cart, although we won't be able to do anything with that right now. And here's what we're going to do. So we're already out of time here. It's 5 o'clock. If anyone is on the clock, you're welcome to leave. If anyone wants to stay, We're going to go ahead and do just sort of the nitty-gritty elements. We're not going to go too far in depth. I predict another maybe 15 to 20 minutes, unfortunately. Is everyone okay with that, or should we hold this off and pick up next week? All right. No hard feelings. If you have to leave, you have to leave. All right. Is everyone currently caught up with where we are? Is there anything that I should go back to so you can finish typing? Or is everyone just kind of watching at this point? I've already lost you all. Okay, I'm going to keep working then. Stop me if anything doesn't make sense. And now that we have all these items, anytime the cart changes, this is going to get re-rendered, this whole component, and our cart display is just going to render these all together. So you'll remember, maybe, that our products at the top of our listing have a bunch of different properties here. I'm going to copy this out just so I can see what they are. We'll put them in a comment. So these are all the properties for our specific objects, and our cart is just an array of objects. So what we want to do here is I'm going to create basically like a box at the top of the page. And inside that box, we're going to have maybe a header 3 that just says items in your cart. And let's cart.length. Let's get however many are currently in there and throw it in. And let's create a state variable here. I'm going to put it at the top. Cart is showing. Set cart is showing. Use state. False. And so this is just going to be whether our cart, like the details of our cart is currently showing, or whether we're just showing the summary tagline. So let's put a button in here too. And this button will say toggle cart. And when it's clicked, we want to have a handler on click. We'll run the function.
I can't see what you're writing, what you're coding. Is it only me?
Is my VS Code not showing?
No.
Or is it too small?
It's showing, but it's like frozen, the same as it was before. Just import, and that's it. Is it just me? Oh, no. Okay. I just enlarged it, and it's in the bottom. Sorry about it.
That's all right. Anything else that I should stop for? Okay. So this button here, when it's clicked, we run a function, and this is an arrow function, so it returns a reference to a function that we're going to execute later, the callback. And this function just sets the new value of this state Boolean to be whatever it's not. So if it's true, it's going to set it to false. If it's false, it's going to set it to true. And now we're going to do our conditional rendering down here. So if our cart is showing, then we'll also render all the elements for our cart. So let's create an unordered list, which is just going to be a bunch of bullet points. And we need a bunch of different list items for all of the elements in our cart, but there's no predefined number of elements in the cart. It could be anything, could be any elements. And so we need to do this smart. Does anyone know how we can take this cart array and turn it into list items here? What function do we need?
Map function.
We need a map function. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to call cart.map. And this will take our product and do something with it. And we're going to create, we're going to return a list item. Anytime you have an unordered list or an ordered list, the children should be list items. And you'll remember that if we use a map to create elements, they all need to have keys. Thankfully, we have an ID property for all of our different products, and so that can be our key. Key is equal to product.id. And then we need to make this some sort of elements. I'm going to just make it a text element that just says maybe product.title. So grabbing the title of the product, and then times or no, we're not dealing with quantity today, so we'll leave that out. So let's just also add the price, product.price. And I'm going to put this in parentheses just so that it's sort of an addendum. Cool. So this is going to be our return. We have our list item. We have just a text element, and it's the title of the product in our cart and how much it costs. Another thing we probably want in here is we probably want a button so that we can remove the item. So let's put the text to be removed on submit, or rather on click. And we're going to call remove from cart with the specific product, since we have that. And right now this function doesn't do anything, but we'd like it to at some point. And let's do this. I also want to have a button at the bottom of our list. So I'm going to put this inside of a div, which is just an empty box. And we'll put our unordered list in there. And then let's also have a button down here, clear cart. And when this button is clicked, then we're going to call clear cart. And actually, we don't need to do anything crazy. We can just pass it the reference to this function. Since there's no parameters or anything, we can just say when it's clicked, call this clear cart function. Okay, is any part of what we're doing here unclear? Right now, it's not going to show us anything just because our cart is empty. But does this kind of understand, does this make sense what all this rendering is? Okay. So we have that down. Let's do a couple things here. So these functions don't currently exist. Let's add one more piece of code somewhere else, and then we'll finish up implementing these functions. So right now in our listings page, this is all of our search functionality, which is irrelevant. And then our products are being shown, and they're shown through the product listing components. So let's add one piece to this product listing. Let's add a button at the bottom, add to carts. And we need a way to get to that add to cart function. And because this is also a child of our tree, we can grab it from the context. Use context, cart context. And we're going to grab the add to cart function. Click, add or rather, add to cart with our specific product. All right. So this is the last thing we're not going to do in our actual cart. Everything left is to implement these functions and make them do what we want. So let's start with add to cart because that's the most important. And again, I'm going to go into our listings page and just grab the structure of our products. Let's close all these unnecessary things. And put this in a comment just for easy reference. All right, so this is what our products look like. I put it in the wrong file. Cart.js. There we go. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, given a object here, we want to add it to our cart. So this should be pretty easy to do. What we're going to do is we're going to, let's do this the wrong way first. So let's call set cart. And we're going to take whatever's currently in cart, and then we're going to add our new item. That's pretty easy. Does anyone foresee what could be an issue with this? This is kind of open-ended. This honestly, in some people's view, might not even be an issue. Because we're not handling quantity of an element, so like over here in our carts, maybe we'd say we have 3 of an item or 4 of an item, we probably don't want the same item to show up like 4 or 5 times. And so what we should probably do here is we should check if the item is already in your cart, and if so, not add it again. So we're going to do that really quick. We're going to search through all of the items in our cart. We're going to get current item equal to cart at the specific index, and if current item.id is equal to new item.id, then we're going to return and say don't do anything. So what this is doing is if we find an item that shares the same ID, it's already in the cart, then we're going to exit out of our add to cart function. We're not going to do anything. That way we don't have any duplicates. And if not, and we get down here, we can add it to the end of our cart. All right, and then clear cart. This one is also really easy. We can just set it to an empty array. And remove from cart. So let's copy out this right here. And we want to check old item. If we find the old item in our cart and we find the right index, then here's what we do. We're going to go ahead and do cart.splice, arrays splice JavaScript. Let me just show you the definition of this method. So splice lets us take an element out of an array, and we say where is the start of the chain of elements we want to take out and how many. So this is going to be the index of the item we want to take out, and we're going to delete one thing. So we're going to delete at index I, and we're going to delete 1. And once we make this change, in order to have React notice that we made the change, we need to call setCart again. and then we can go ahead and return from our function code we're done. This looks really weird here. The reason why we have to do this is with arrays in React or objects, unless you change the actual array or the object, like put a new array or object inside of that state variable, React is not going to go ahead and re-render the page. You may have the updated value in certain locations, but it will not cause a re-render where you need it to be. And so that's really dangerous. And so the only way that we can force it to re-render is by setting a cart to a completely new array. And this array we're creating with just the elements in cart. This is a spread operator, which means take all the elements, spread them out into a new array. And that's what's happening up here too. We have an array. It spreads out all the elements from the existing cart and then puts another one at the end. All right, so this is what we got. Let's try this out and see if this works. So I'm in my React app. Let's go ahead and open up our DevTools. And I'm going to refresh the page. Is this right? I don't think I have any console.log statements in here. Oop, I do have a bunch of console logs. All right, we'll leave them out for now. So ignore everything that's going on down here. I was just checking to see if there were any errors. There's no errors. So right now we start with our cart as empty. There are no items in the cart. We toggle the cart. It shows there's nothing in there, and we can go ahead and clear it, but there's nothing in there. You can hide it, show it, hide it. All right. So I'm going to zoom out here for just a second, and let's search for laptop. Filter out all of our other options. So now we have a button down here of add it to our cart. We're going to click that. And now we have one item in our cart. If we toggle it, it shows Windows Laptop and the price. We can remove it. No more items in our cart. We can add it back. Let's see if we successfully prevented having duplicates. Great, no duplicates. We can clear it. Everything's gone. All right, this looks pretty good to me. We close this out. And let's add our suitcase, which is just comically large. And now we have a suitcase too. All right, so this is our basic cart functionality here. I regret not being able to make this as interactive as I would have liked, just because I want to make sure that we get this done today. Hopefully this was at least a little bit enlightening. I expect that there will be a need to go back through and review how this works. So I'm going to, after this is finished, I'm going to go ahead and make some finishing touches on not this specific code, but the example where we also had the quantity. And then I'm going to make a post in the EMU announcements with the link to the repository and the branch. I'm going to merge that branch into main and add some comments just to explain what all is going on. If you want to go back through and you're a little confused, feel free to reach out, ask me any questions. If you're interested in trying to add context to something in your existing project, that would also be an interesting side project. Take this and use it somewhere else. I think probably it'll be a little bit hard to figure out where context could be useful until you get to multiple different pages and we get to React Router, which will be a little bit later in the semester. Are there any questions or anything you're curious about before we break?
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry about it. What do you think about our application? Where can we use this useContext?
So This is a little tricky just because I think the application, similar to this application we're building here, is not really large enough where it demands using context. But if you wanted to, especially now that you're working on some stylings for your project, you could go ahead and try and implement two different themes for your site. So a dark mode and a light mode, and have a context where when a button is clicked, you change between dark mode and light mode, and then you change your styles based on that. So that's probably not going to work. Probably what you would need to do there is have CSS properties for all of your different components that are important. One for just sort of general unchanging structure, like font size, and then have a separate property for what color it's supposed to be, whether this is, paragraph 2 light mode or paragraph 2 dark mode, or apply a different class if we have light mode or dark mode. And then your CSS will have those properties that change it. Another thing you could do, if you have multiple different pages in your site, you could find something that would be provided throughout your entire site and pass it down through a context. I don't know exactly what that would be, but I could think about it a little bit more. I think a dark mode and a light mode is an interesting way that you can apply it to pretty much any site. And that might be a good starting point.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. I had a message in
I'll
chat.
try.
Yeah, I think that would be a good starting point.
I have a question as well, Ellie.
Okay.
Eli, can we use filter instead of splice when we want to remove
There are two different functions. So splice is for operating on an array, and it will take out elements in a specific line, and it doesn't care about what kind of things they are. So if you know exactly where the items are that you want to remove, then go ahead and do so. You could also use filter here, but you would have to do it a little bit differently. So you could filter and only keep items that have a different ID, and then go ahead and set the cart to that new array. That would also work.
Okay, thank you so much, Eli.
Anything else while we're here? All right. Thank you guys for staying late. I really appreciate it. I'm going to also go ahead and see if I can record this and upload it to YouTube. And hopefully all those links will be available later. So just keep an eye out. Happy Wednesday. Have a good weekend. And I'll
Thanks a
see
lot.
some of you
Happy
next
Wednesday
week.
Thank you
to
so
you too.
much. And yeah, happy Wednesday. Bye,
Thanks.
all.